Hey, welcome to On the Path podcast with Cheryl Nembhard. You know, since I was a kid, I was told my conversations were way too deep. Well, now it's paying off. Join me and the names you know as we go deep into their personal stories of triumph, tragedy, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Friends, this crazy, overwhelming life we live calls for some serious encouragement and inspiration. So grab a cup of coffee and get your notebook because we're going into the classroom of life. So let's get lifted with faith-filled conversations. I'll see you on the path.
Watch in Canada on Yes TV and the Yes TV app. Or watch on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, Pioneer Network, Faith TV, and more in the US. Also watch and subscribe on our YouTube channel.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of On the Path. Listen, I am lit up. We have a warrior in the building. I'm going to say a modern day Deborah for our time, someone who is passionate about all things justice, and I cannot wait for you to meet her. She is someone I call a friend, a shero, a sister, someone I love to link arms with, and I'm just so excited that we get to sit and chat with the one and only Sandra Van Opstal. Let me tell you a little bit about this powerhouse. Sandra Maria Van Opstal is a second-generation Latina co-founder and executive director of Chasing Justice. This is a movement led by people of color to mobilize a lifestyle of faith and justice. She serves as executive pastor at Grace and Peace Community on Chicago's West Side. I had a chance to walk with her and walk the grounds of her neighborhood. It was incredible, the work that she's doing there. Sandra holds a Master's of Divinity from Trinity Evangelical Divinity School and is a doctoral candidate right now at North Park Seminary. You better go, girl. She's an international speaker, author, and activist, and she is recognized globally for her work in pursuing justice and disrupting oppressive systems within the church. In other words, she's a holy disruptor. And her recent publications include A Rally, Communal Prayers for the Lovers of Jesus and Justice, A Rhythm of Prayer, Still Evangelical, and The Next Worship. Yeah, she is a world changer. Would you please give a huge Canadian and on the path welcome to Sandra Van Opstal? Boom, boom, boom.
Thank you so much.
Sandra's and then she's just like, so calm. Thank you so much. Sandra, yet in this calm moment, you are a phoenix. You are fire. As I would say, you are fire, girl. Sandra, I love everything about you and what you stand for. I cannot wait for this conversation. Been hoping to have it for some time. I would call you a world changer, and I always feel like people who change their communities and the world locally and globally somehow have a big story themselves, something that shifted and changed in them. Let us know a little bit about the story of Sandra and how you got into the work you're doing now.
Well, first of all, I love the image of a phoenix, but I think I think I'm more like a duck, where the feet are pedaling underwater while the duck looks calm above the water. I think I'm more like that. My journey has been so interesting because it was early on as like a small child that I remember having a sense of what is good and right and beautiful in the world and what is just not right. And I was very verbal about it all growing up. So I'm sure my parents had a lot to share about those early years. But I think for me, like for many of us who have maybe our aunties or uncles or grandparents or parents, we see like the early moments of the personality and the passions of a person happen when they're little. And so I would say that the early years of my life were deeply not only revealing, but they were deeply impacted by my experiences. So I grew up as a daughter of two immigrants. Both of my parents came from South America, and we lived in the city of Chicago, and we moved to the suburbs when I was in grade school. And I believe that move that we did from being around people who were like us to being around people who were not like us actually deeply shaped my understanding of the world, what it means to be othered in the world, and what true hospitality and embrace could do in the life of a person. And so I believe that for me, the world changer came later. It was like, oh, there's other things. But I think the experience was like, how do you help people not feel othered in the world? How do you help people feel belonging in this world that we live in? And that was the origin of my desire to create spaces and places where people matter and to change systems that are oppressive to people because it makes them feel like they don't belong.
Oh my goodness. I want to talk about that more. And you just kind of touched on it a little bit. You've described your upbringing as a second generation Latina, with you had deep Catholic roots in the beginning. And you also talked about your experiences. You've talked over time about your experiences in sort of white evangelical spaces. How did that shape you? How did that, shape your influence, shape your lens around, church and all things faith?
Yeah, one of the things that for me has deeply shaped my faith is the diversity of denominations and ethnic and racial spaces that I've worshiped in. So yeah, at first I went to church with my grandma, with my abuela, and it was Spanish Catholic service twice a week. You know, she went every day, but I think I went with her twice a week, and that was the kind of the beginning of my faith journey. And then I spent time in white evangelical contexts. I spent time in the United Methodist Church. I spent time in a Kojic church. I spent time in an immigrant Mexican church. And then I congregated obviously in the church that I was most recently pastoring, which was at Grace and Peace. And that was a kind of mixed Latino, African American, English bilingual congregation. And now I'm actually congregating. We've made a move as a family to an all Black church on the west side of Chicago really recently, which is primarily for my son so that he can be in a space where he is the majority person, and we are actually displaced within that experience. So I've been in all kinds of churches. I've been in Pentecostal churches, Reformed churches, the Evangelical Covenant Church. And what I've found is that in each of those expressions, I learned something new about God. In each of those expressions, I learned new practices of discipleship. In each of those expressions, I was challenging and interrogating assumptions I had about faith and the biases that we bring into scripture and what it means to truly worship God in this world that we live in. So yes, I have had all of these different experiences. And I think that's why I love being around people who are different than me. Because I'm like, oh, there's probably something I have to learn from you. And then on top of that, you know, just having so much exposure to through student ministry, the global church and what is happening in Cape Town and in Bethlehem and in Costa Rica and in Bogota and all these places around the world where the church is on fire and it's growing and it's in a state of revival. And so those things have shaped me and they invite me to deeper discipleship.
I love what you just said there. You named just a few, and we know there's so many more churches around the globe that are on fire in a place, a season of revival, thriving, flourishing. And I know we as the church with the Western lens are so limited in our scope. We're so small in our thinking, and I don't even think we understand what is happening around the globe. There is a boom and expansion. There is a generation of young people rising. It's just unreal what God is doing around the globe. And I'm so glad that there are people like you that bring that back, those learnings, and help us understand that we are just a drop in the bucket in the kingdom. It's so much bigger and wider than us. And I think that's, if I could be so bold, I feel like that's one of the reasons why you launched Chasing Justice, is to recalibrate, to educate, to right some wrongs. It's doing incredible things around the world and in local community spaces. And Chasing Justice, if I'm right, is primarily sort of like the force behind it. They're all people of color, all passionate about justice and reflecting God's heart on the earth. How did you even get into this initiative? How did that start? And tell us sort of like some markers. What's the impact you're seeing of Chasing Justice?
Yeah. Chasing Justice started because I was hanging out with a friend one day and we realized that there was a need for a community to connect the dots between faith in Jesus and living justly in the world. That there was a generation that was emerging, and I think has been emerging since probably the millennial generation in particular, that was like, hey, I want to make a difference in the world. I believe we can make a difference in the world. I believe that my power and my privilege, my voice, even from a place of marginalization, sometimes I think I can do something about this stuff that's happening. And so they were trying to make a difference in the world, and they were also going to church and worshiping and hearing sermons. So they'd attend church, worship, and hear sermons, and then go and do the work of justice. But they were not connected. They were not informing each other. And so for me, as someone who came to a desire to live justly in the world through the scriptures, I was like, this is really problematic because it should be faith rooted and faith informed. And so how can we get a generation who's excited about transforming and changing the world to do it sustained by and rooted in and powered by and informed by their Christian faith? How can we do that? And because my early days of ministry were, I was working for a student ministry on a college campus. I did that for about a decade. Then I was working in the context of the urban church and kind of community organizing in an urban space. And I decided, like, actually, I want to work with young people again, like exclusively, because I believe that I see a future where young people of color in particular are innovating and creating new ways of being the church in our country and around the world. That they're going to take the legacy that was passed down to them and they're going to ask new questions and create new ways. And I want to be a part of that. Like, I want to be the coach for that, like behind the scenes, like, woohoo, you can do it. And also, don't run yourself into the ground. And also, right. I know why you hate the church, but also we are the church. So I wanted to be in that space. And so a lot of the justice spaces that I was participating in and that folks like me were participating in were created by and led by people from the majority. So they were white founded, white led. Think of some of the major development organizations that do global development. Think of some of the major kind of advocacy groups. And while I think it's great that they have done the work they've done over the years, I was finding myself asking the question, well, what if we led? What if we weren't only the recipients of the work? What if we were actually the leaders of the work? What if we were no longer the mission field? What if we were actually the mission force? What if we were not the learners, but the teachers? Because the people with the problem are the ones who know and have the answer to the problem. And so with the rich faith that communities of color have had with ideas of biblical justice and peace, with ideas of the beloved community, with ideas and practices of resistance and resilience in the face of struggle and injustice, with the ability to continue to love God even though it feels like the sky is falling. Who better to help this generation moving forward to say, hey, we actually have ancestors and elders who did this. Yeah. They survived this kind of thing. And they still loved Christ, even though they interrogated the social space that Christians lived in. Mm-hmm. And so we felt like we should be leading. And our white siblings can come alongside of us as allies, and they can learn from us and they can participate with us. But we're going to be at the center because we've already spent 400 years following someone else.
I have so many questions. I'm trying to stay on topic because you are lighting me up in so many ways. But I got to ask you, it's not even in my notes, but you said we invite our white brothers and sisters to come alongside as allies in this work. How's that going?
Yeah, some days are rough, but I have to say that if you think about allyship as a practice more than a title, I think it feels encouraging. Like
Mm,
there are ways that our siblings practice allyship alongside of us. They stand in solidarity with us. They utilize their networks for our causes. They bring our cause into the room when it's not being thought of. So, for example, in a lot of spaces I go to, people talk about, oh, the church needs this and the church is like this and the church is really suffering here. And my friends that are practicing allyship say, okay, well, who are you really talking about? Are you talking about the whole church? Are you talking about the American church? Are you talking about white suburban churches? Which church are you talking about? Because it doesn't describe these other people I see over here. And it's not faithful to the data that we see with the immigrant church or communities of color in the US. And so people that are practicing allyship can bring our perspective into a room when we're not there. I am a facilitator in a tool called cultural intelligence. So
mhm.
my husband and I both are facilitators in cultural intelligence. And what it helps you do, similar to like emotional intelligence, it helps you kind of understand how you are in crossing cultures and becoming friends across differences and creating initiatives with people who are different than you.
Yeah.
And one of the best things I think we do is we train together because my husband is a white guy from Wisconsin who's like a very linear thinker and he's a project manager and he does things a particular way. And I am a very expressive person who's circular and holistic in my thinking, both culturally and in personality. And I have a totally different outlook on life because I lived through the lens of an immigrant child and he lived through the
Right.
lens of a person with incredible economic and social privilege. And so when we teach together, there are certain things that people can hear better when he says it than they can hear if I say. So we may say the same thing, but it sounds different coming from his mouth. And
Right.
so I'm like, this is just a reality. I can't help bias. I can't do anything about unconscious bias, but what I can do is work in partnership with someone
Yes.
to make sure that we collectively
Yes.
can be heard
And leverage it in some good way.
and leverage it in some way. So the same thing goes, for example, on a larger, more social picture. I think about some of the advocacy movements on immigration. Sometimes people that aren't immigrants can be heard differently than those of us who are immigrants or children of immigrants because it seems like it's self-serving if we're bringing a point forward. So some of the strategy around allyship is go get your people. Like go
Right.
get your people, the people that can't hear me, go get them. and
Right.
and teach them and build a bridge to you
Yeah.
so that between you and I there could be a bridge and then between me and my people there could be a bridge. So
I love this. Yeah, I love this conversation. Thank you for that, Sandra, for saying that. And it's it's important to note here that this is good, holy, but hard work that you're doing. And you're recognized for this work, recognized for disrupting. Toxic thinking, old oppressive systems. You are a holy disruptor. I wonder what's been the challenge. I know I see the good. I'm hearing the good, but let's name it. What's been the pushback and some of the challenges that maybe you didn't even expect to have within and from the church?
okay, I have two challenges. One is idolatry and the other one is lack of imagination. So
I love how you had them right there.
which one do you want to start with? So
Whew.
let's start with lack of imagination. I
Yeah.
think part of it is no, let's start with idolatry. Let's start with
Okay.
idolatry. Idolatry is the idea that you put anything before God. Anything becomes before God. And so in our country, the way that we have done church over the last hundreds of years, since the beginning, it has centered a particular a particular set of values and way of being in the world that is highly individualistic and is focused not on this life, but on the life afterwards. So even the way we think about our witness, it's like, well, what are we witnessing to and for? I would say, hey, when we live in this world, everything that we do as Christians should be a foretaste and a pointer and a sign to a coming kingdom. So we shouldn't tell people about a kingdom that is coming. We should live in the kingdom that is coming. And the Bible describes that very clearly. When you love one another, when you care for one another, when you grieve with one another, when you celebrate with one another, the invitation that the scriptures give us are highly collective. It's about mutual flourishing. It's about collective flourishing.
Come on.
And so I would say that is what the Bible invites us to, the way I understand it. But in our experiences as American Christians, it's been highly individualistic. Like, go and get your best life, live on purpose. Life is about you. All of our worship songs are really about like you in a corner with God, singing to God, and God loves you and you love God. And that's all true.
Yeah. Becoming the best version of yourself.
But that's just self-actualization, and that's entertainment. That's not the gospel. The gospel is that God so loved the world, and that the way that we live in the world should tell people that there is a king that lives here, and his name is Jesus, and he's the King of peace and of beauty and of grace and of justice and love. And if how we live doesn't show people that, then it's not disruption for the sake of disruption. It's I think, calling people back to the way things should be. And the prophets both in the major and minor prophets, all of them address the idolatry of Israel. They address the fact that people have forgotten what they were supposed to be doing in the world as a way of showing their love for God, not just talking about their love for God, not just singing songs and giving sacrifices and doing all that stuff, which we could go to Amos or Isaiah or anywhere. And we'll find that God's like, I'm not interested in your words. I'm interested in how you treat the poor. I'm interested in how you enact justice. I'm interested in how you love your neighbor, Jesus says. So I think idolatry is what I'm addressing. Yeah. I'm a worship leader, so I'm trying to call people to God.
Yes.
And I think like Jeremiah or like Amos, or others, it's emotional. Like if you read the prophets, they were very sad. They were very upset. Yeah. They wanted things to be different in the world.
Yeah.
And people didn't listen to them. And so I think that's kind of the byproduct. Like sometimes I'm so frustrated. And my husband's like, well, at the end, you know what happened to Jeremiah at the end? Like he was deserted and alone. And I'm like, thanks. I think it could feel very lonely, but I'm trying to do what God has called me to do, which is address idolatry. And I think the second thing is imagination. Like somehow we believe that if we are more generous, or if we are more connected, or if we interrogate our biases, that somehow we're going to lose something instead of gain something. That if we change something about the way we do church or invite other voices into our bookshelves, that somehow there's not enough room at the table for all of us.
That part.
And we don't have an imagination where God's kingdom is expansive and abundant and generous.
We're just going to collect the offering at this time, and I'm going to call up the choir to come as we sing.
I got a song, just kidding.
As we call Sandra to also do worship at this time for her own sermon. Oh my goodness. As the Bible says, Selah, we take a minute to pause and think on that. That is, woof. And I want to stay there. The frustration of those who do the prophetic work, being that prophet crying in the wilderness for the heart of God to be reflected on the earth, to the poor, to the marginalized, those that have been silenced. This word justice, Sandra, is so contested in the Big C church. let me just walk you through. Is justice a part of Jesus's teaching? Is it the way of Jesus? Is justice a part of the gospel, or is it separate from the gospel? Are we spending too much time on that? Is it is it part of the portfolio of every believer, or is it assigned to certain people who have that burden? Like, what? Just set us straight. What is the church's responsibility in and around the work of justice?
Justice exists as an invitation because shalom does not exist.
Please say that again one more time.
Justice exists as an invitation because shalom does not. When we are with our Creator at the end of all things, the Bible says that Jesus says that all things will be made new. So there will be no need for justice because there will be well-being and flourishing and healing. There will be no more tears or pain. It will just be full flourishing in God's presence. But until then, we do the work of justice because we recognize that it's not that way for people. And so oftentimes, even last night, I was talking to my 2 10-year-old kids, and they asked me about the theme of a conference I was going to. And they said, what's the theme? And I said, shalom. And they said, well, what is shalom? Shalom is like peace, right, Mom? And I said, yes, shalom is like peace. Shalom is like when nothing is missing and nothing is broken. Shalom is when things are as they should be. And we don't live in that right now, do we? And I said, no, we don't. And I said, tell me how you know that. And they began to describe just some things in their school and in our neighborhood and in the world. And I said, okay, well, until that day comes, we as Christians have the responsibility to live in ways that make things right for our neighbors. And so justice is the invitation that comes from Jesus and from God, from the Old Testament to the New Testament. Justice is an invitation that comes to us as believers to name what is not right in the world and to do something about it. I believe it is our witness. And I believe that without doing justice, we have an anemic witness. So the scriptures tell us that true worship, Amos, Isaiah, Nehemiah, Jeremiah, true justice cannot exist without worship. True worship cannot exist without justice. It just can't. Yeah. And the work of justice is not sustainable without worship, without connection to God. And so I didn't grow up in the church, so I don't know what the problem is with the word justice or the work of justice, because I came to Christ through Bible study. And I studied Genesis through Revelation. And then I went to seminary and I studied Genesis through Revelation in the original languages. And it was very clear to me in the Greek and Hebrew that the call to justice was actually more pronounced, not in English, but in the original languages, through the poetry, through the examples, and through the kind of coupling between righteousness and justice. So one example in Spanish, that verse we all like in English says, seek first the kingdom of God.
Yes.
And his righteousness, right? And all these things shall be added to you. Well, in the Spanish version and many Latin language versions, it says, seek first the kingdom of God and his justice, his justicia, and all these things shall be added to you.
Stop it.
So the interpreter's decision to choose the word righteousness for that Greek word over justice, I think, has shaped our theology in many ways.
Wow. Because we're hyper-focused on right living as opposed to living a life of justice and seeing that reflected on the earth.
Well, yeah, and right living with who? Right living in what way? Right living, rightness with yourself? Rightness with God, rightness with your neighbor, rightness with creation, right. All of those rightnesses. And so that's the invitation. It's like true salvation, true deliverance, true liberation, true flourishing comes when you're right with yourself when you're right with God, when you and I are right with one another, and when we're right with the creation God has given us. All of
Yeah.
those things are an invitation to us. So I would encourage people, like if that somehow sets off alarms for you, then I would encourage you to ask the Holy Spirit, why does the word that is repeated over 55 times in the Old Testament with the word righteousness, why does that make me squeamish? Why does that make me
That's good.
upset? Why does that alarm me? What is it that
Right.
I think will happen if I love my neighbor?
Man, Sandra, for all of the reasons you've stated, for all of the things you've said, for who you are, how you show up in the world, you are absolutely hands down one of my sheroes. Wherever I am, whether it's in this continent or another, and they ask me who are your top 5 people, or who should we be watching, or who's making an impact, who's launching movements that we need to know, I'm always calling your name. As someone who works in the faith and justice space, I just admire you so much. And I think I want to ask this question because it matters so much. In this current climate and in the times that we find ourselves in right now, where there is major pushback against inclusion and welcome, where DEI is almost becoming symbolic with a swear word or a curse word, what are your marching orders for us in these spaces who are doing the work, those who are understanding the importance and the call of Jesus to do the work of justice? How do we mobilize right now? Tell us, our next steps.
I want to first say that we've been here before. We just haven't been here like this. So I want to say that for those of you like, oh, we've been through this before, we'll weather it out. I'm like, we've been here before, but we haven't been here like this.
This.
I believe that 100 years from now, a lot will be written about this point in time in history. And like we look back at other moments like civil rights, World War I and II, we're going to look back, the Great Depression, we're going to go back and say, where was the church? Where exactly was the church? And then the question will be, which part of the church? Like in civil rights, it's clear where each of the churches were. And while there was a sprinkling of non-Black activists in civil rights, it was the Black church that led that thing. And so I believe we're in a very important global moment in time. And the only thing I can say is that we have to figure out how to love our neighbor. And not talk about loving our neighbor, or like the young lawyer said, not to choose who our neighbor is, but truly ask, what does it mean to love those around me and to love those that I don't identify with? And so that's what I think is the call. The call is love in public. I think justice is just love in public, and so the call is love in public ways, in social ways, in interpersonal ways, in institutional ways. So if I'm going to love my neighbor and I'm going to wave to them from my mailbox as they walk by, and I'm going to know that their minimum wage they're getting paid is not enough to pay rent in the city of Chicago, then I'm going to be asking questions about whether I really love my neighbor. Because I can't say, hey, I'm so sorry you're cold and hungry out there. I hope you do. I hope you get some food. No. Jesus has a lot to say about that in scripture. So I think my call is to say, I wonder why my neighbor is struggling so much when they're working 3 jobs and they still can't pay their rent. What is it that's wrong? Well, actually, rents are overinflated in our country, in the U.S. At least I don't know about Canada, but in the U.S. rents are overinflated.
Oh, yeah.
The housing market is overinflated. There's no regulations in the city of Chicago about what can be built. And so when an alderperson, when a councilman comes and says, I want to institute some policies and some ordinances around affordable housing, I'm going to say, oh, I will be at that rally. I will be at that meeting. I will raise my voice for that. Is it political? Absolutely, because everything we do is political. Everything we do is political because we live in a politic, in a society. And so I can't love my hungry neighbor unless I ask what is making them hungry. I can't love my immigrant neighbor unless I am asking what is making them scared when they're legally here and they're still scared. right? I can't love my Black neighbor if I'm not asking how the removal of our American history from our American books is going to affect not only my Black neighbor, but my Black son. Like, how is that going to affect him that his history will be removed? That there won't be any protections for him? That we're removing policies in our country that impact those who are disabled and their ability to get accommodations when they need in school, right? So those are all things that, like, you could say, oh, love your neighbor as yourself. But when it comes to the practical question of how do I love my neighbor, then you got to break it down for me. And so I think our marching orders, I would say, is to love our neighbor. And the second thing is you ask the question, what does it mean to love my neighbor? And then learn. There are 3 things I usually tell people about, like, how to kind of live justly, or how did I get, they're like, how do you do this? And I'm like, well, there's 3 areas. The first area is hospitality, which says, hey, I'm welcoming you into my space. You're going to welcome me into your space. The second is solidarity. Like, hey, I'm standing with you. What affects you affects me. That's also in the Bible. Mutuality, which says, I need you. So not only do I welcome you, not only do I stand with you, but I need you. In order to understand God, in order to be enriched in my understanding of the world, in order to live life well, I need people who are different than me to show me where I'm not seeing things and to show me what I need to learn. So how are we supposed to love our neighbor if our zip codes, which I don't know what you guys call them, postal codes.
Postal codes, yeah.
If our postal codes and our algorithms keep us from seeing one another. Right. So it's hard. I mean, I got to do it all the time. Like, I have to be like, okay, well, who am I not seeing, and how can I see them digitally or in person? Like, what am I not understanding? What am I missing? That's what I'm asking.
I want to stay there. That I want to lean into that. It's even worth, like, getting rid of the other question. How we even begin this work for people who are leaning in, learning, maybe just trying to wrestle down this idea of what it means to live a life of justice, is to see people like with the eyes of God, El Rohi, the God who sees me. To see them is to know them, to make connection, to know their story, all of that. Let's name it. What are the things that have blocked us up to this point from truly seeing people? What are the things that we maybe need to get rid of or unlearn in order to see our neighbor?
For me, proximity is everything, like actual presence with people. And so one of the reasons we decided to move into the community that we moved into was so that we would live around people who had a different experience of life than we did. Because when they don't plow our streets when it snows, we know what it's like not to get good city services. When a light goes out on our bike path or on our trail and it doesn't get fixed for weeks and weeks, we know what it's like for that darkness to invite danger on our street. So I think proximity is important. Being present with people is important. So it could be where you shop, where you go to church, where you choose to, like I'm learning as a parent, like where I choose to put my kids in sports actually impacts what I experience of motherhood or parenthood. You know, like if I'm around a bunch of people who are economically privileged and affluent and have a ton of choices and go on a million vacations and are always on a plane, and, you know, then that affects what we talk about our friends and how we, what we'll choose to do as an activity with our friends in our soccer team, for example. But if we're on a soccer team where it's primarily immigrant communities and children of immigrants, then how we understand the world, choices, economics, the city of Chicago even is different. So there's 2 very different cities of Chicago. There's a city of Chicago where you have all the privileges and luxury and choices. And there's a city of Chicago where you don't have those choices or luxuries. And as a person who has choices, because I am economically and socially upper middle class, then I can choose to ignore those who are different than me. So I always tell people, like, hey, where do you go to church? Where do you shop? What's the coffee shop that you go to? Where do you buy your shoes?
That's
you know, like, where do you walk? Like I used to tell people, oh, it's so nice that you want to live in this low income. A lot of people would move here, like, I'm going to be a justice person. I'm going to move into this low income neighborhood and make a difference, you know? And then I'm like, if I put a GPS tracker on you, or looked at where your Apple Watch was going, you never go west from where you live. So actually you live in a gentrified neighborhood and you only access the east side of where you're living, which has all your favorite things. The west side of where you're living, you don't invest economically. You don't spend time with people there. You don't know your neighbors there. You just put your head down on your pillow in that space. So really, you're just wasting everybody's time and hiking up the rent because you're not actually a part of this community. So I think the first thing, the practice is proximity.
Yeah.
Welcome, being in each other's spaces. What keeps us from doing that? Fear.
Yeah.
Discomfort, like, oh my gosh, what if I make a mistake, which I do every day.
Right. What if I don't get it right?
What if I don't get it right? Or just discomfort. Like I remember when we first moved into our neighborhood, people got shot around us all the time. That did not scare me. Like I was like, well, when you gotta go, you gotta go. What bothered me was loud music. Because I wasn't used to it. I moved from the city to the suburb. I was not used to it. What bothered me was like how close your neighbor's window was to your window, and they could hear you. And so it was discomfort. It wasn't even like danger. It was just discomfort. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like one of those people. Like I want to live near people, but not near people.
Wow. Boom.
I was like, okay, I don't want to share my backyard with someone else,
Yeah.
And so I think part of it is when you're close to something, you begin to feel yourself like, going to a church where people express preaching and worship different, or they do small groups different. And you're like, well, the small group should be led like this, or really during worship, we should do these things. Or, if we were a biblical church, we would do it like this. You start to see all your biases and preferences when you displace yourself. So I think anybody could do it for a week on a mission trip. Not everybody could do it for a lifetime, and
it's a whole different story.
Yeah. And I think those kinds of things, that kind of self-awareness and like just honesty about yourself, I have some real strong preferences and this is teaching me new things about myself. I think those are what keep us, we don't want to see ourselves. I don't want to see myself.
So good. Sandra, I love this. I love to hear you laugh and have a lightheartedness about this hard work. And almost, you inject joy, as much as you can. I think about a recent time that you just, it was a hard season for you, just physically in your body. You were going through things and you're still trying to show up, still be faithful to the call. I got to ask you just as I've got a surprise question at the end. So this is the last official question. In this heavy and hard work that can take such a toll, how do you avoid burnout and being jaded from the work?
You can avoid burnout by having practices that sustain your joy. So rest does not necessarily fix burnout. You can be burnt out and take a week on vacation and go rest and come right back and be burnt out right again.
I just want to say that we're selling plates of food, hot meals downstairs in the church, and the Women's Bazaar is going to be gathering. I feel like I want to do announcements because somebody is preaching hard over there. The Ladies' Bazaar will be on Tuesday.
That's right.
What is happening? You just said that we can go on vacation, we can intentionally rest and still come away burnt out because it's not about physical rest. What is it about?
Yeah, and that's why I think the invitation to self-care is important. But an invitation to self-care without soul care will never sustain us. We need to know what it is we need for our souls to confront generations of genocide, generations of racism, right? What is it that in our bodies that can confront that? It's a sense that God is with you. So what helps you see that God is with you? For me, honestly, it's bike riding. I ride my bike and I'm in my body, and because of how God made me and how I'm wired, and just so much of my life is held in my body. Ugh. And I take a bike ride and I like watch the moms with their kids, and I watch the laborers riding back on their bikes because they use their bikes instead of the public bus system. And I see people jogging, all kinds of different people. And I'm like, these are my neighbors, and they're all going through very different things, and they're all very different.
Yeah.
And I begin to just take in the things around me, and I meet with God. For me, it's a very holy and sacred thing, a bike ride, because I see the people around me, and it's different than when I do the Peloton in the YMCA's. I don't see anybody but the instructor. So I think things like, what do we do with our bodies when our bodies are taking in all this tension? Last week, I was at an event where young Palestinian Christian scholars, theologians, were sharing about the work they're doing in peacemaking and how they think they're going to bring healing to their country. Like, how will God bring healing to their space? And after they all shared, I was like, oh, everything in my body was hurting. Like I was in so much pain. I was super tense. And I texted my friend who was leading the panel. I was like, are we going to do any kind of like worship or breathing or prayer or anything? Like, and he was like, and I said, and if not, can I do something? He said, sure. So, I went up there and did it because I felt like I needed a collective sigh in the room. I needed to breathe in and out.
So good.
And remember that God is with us here in this tension and pain in order for my body to just relax. I needed to hear singing, and I needed to sing in order to release the pain that I was feeling when my siblings were talking.
Come on.
And we had this moment together, and afterwards this young Palestinian participant who was in the room came to me, and she just started talking. Then she started crying, and she said, this song reminded me of a song that my mom used to sing to me because I sing in Arabic. And we just cried together. And that was all we did. We just cried together. And I said, tell me more. And she just shared about her grandmother who lived in Gaza and her mother and all that she was holding as an American citizen with her family living in a different space. And I said, hey, thank you for sharing your story with me, and thank you for crying with me. And so we needed to cry. We needed to breathe. I probably needed a bike ride, but I didn't have a bike with me. So those are the things that I do. I connect with people. I cry. I ugly cry until my whole face hurts. I sing. I dance. And for many of us that come from communities of color, our ancestors and elders had things they did to resist giving up. They had things they did to foster resilience. And a lot of them had to do with your body. It was the songs the choruses that we chanted. It was the spirituals that we sang, the dances that we did that allowed us to remind ourselves that we're human.
So good.
And that we're not heads. We're not minds. We're full people. Yeah. And I think that American Christianity, even in activism, sometimes we feel like we can think our way out of evil. And we can resist with our minds. And we can manifest things with our minds, that's not true. We live things. We live things. And we hold captive our thoughts, but we also worship and live in our bodies. And so I think the idea of embodied prayer and embodied spirituality, which is not new to non-Western cultures, is needed in the Western church for the sustainability of the work of justice. And honestly, even people that aren't trying to do justice, just surviving this world that we live in right now.
Right. So good. Oh, Sandra Van Opstal, you are a gift. I'm so thankful. Your voice is needed. It is loud, clear. It is powerful. It reverberates. I want more of it. How do we track you, follow you, support you in all of this great work that you're doing?
Yes. Well, I like to write things down every once in a while. So I'm like a serial contributor to books. So if you want to find me on Amazon or Target or whatever, you can search my name. I love to write prayers. Like, I think we should have books that have prayers. So there's a bunch of books I've written, like a chapter, or prayer, or liturgy, or something like that. So you could buy our books because if you don't already have a stack full of books written by women of color, you should get them.
Yes.
There's a way that we have encountered life that I think will complement all the tools that you have. So I would say, please buy my books because I think that I did a lot of hard work. I'm not a natural writer. And so I did the hard work of writing for the discipleship of the church. So for sure. And then on Instagram, I'm always posting stuff about my chickens or life or justice or theology. So you can find me on Instagram at Sandra Van Opstal, but you can find me there. Yeah.
I love it. Well, Sandra, we are, just before we go, I always love to ask every guest this one question. It's a bit of a signature question for our podcast here. And I am amazed at how varied the answers and deep the answers are. So I can't wait to ask you this last question. So surprise, here we go. Finish this sentence for me. In light of our conversation, everything you've said as the backdrop to this, it's time for what? It's time for what?
It's time for mutuality.
Any notes around that? Any reasons why around that?
Yeah, it's time for us to work together. It's time for us to empty ourselves, as the scriptures invites us to, and to find that in emptying ourselves, we don't lose anything at all.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to flip it on you. Here we go. What is it not time for?
It's not time for fear.
Put me in A flat real quick,
It's
please.
not time for fear. It's just not time to be afraid. So much of what I see happening in the North American context and in European context too, but I think in the American context around nationalism, like people, just the nationalism that's coming out of the Western space right now, it is indicative of a pandemic of fear. It's fear. And the scriptures tell us that we shouldn't operate out of fear, but out of love and power and sound mind. And fear is the opposite of all those things.
And for those that are the drivers of this nationalistic moment, it is literally fear of losing position, power, and authority, posture to make decisions, and it goes back to the point you made about making space doesn't mean you lose your own. I wish that we could just understand that. Sandra, thank you so much for being on the path.
I wish we weren't so afraid. But we are.
I know.
Lord help us.
Lord help us. Sandra, I'm so thankful. Thank you for being on the path with us. I enjoyed this conversation. I'm so thankful for your voice. We need it. And just we're praying for you as you go.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to On the Path podcast with Cheryl Nembhard. Please like, download, and subscribe. This has been an Exousia Media production.